Hey guys, welcome to my first ever YouTube video on this channel, Maths 101. In today's video, we're going to look at solving this quadratic equation here. The quadratic equation we are given is x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. And we have been asked to solve this. So there are actually a number of ways that you can solve this quadratic equation. One is to factorize and then solve from there. Two is to use the quadratic formula. Or three is to complete the square. And if you didn't know, the quadratic formula actually came from the completing the square method and just basically incorporates all the steps of the completing the square method into one nice formula. But I'll talk about that in another video. For this video, we're going to focus on factorizing and then solving from there, just that method in order to do this question. So the first step that you need to do in order to factorize this is to work out whether this quadratic equation is monic or non-monic. So in this quadratic, so to work that out, you look at the coefficient of the x squared. So here is the x squared in this equation. Now the coefficient of the x squared is actually a 1. So if you didn't know, there's actually an invisible 1 there attached to the x squared. Now say if it was a 2, if we had a 2x squared, the coefficient of the x squared would be a 2. So if you didn't know, the coefficient is just the number in front of the variable. So for example, the coefficient of this term here, 5x, the coefficient of that term is a 5. So it's just a number in front of the variable. So now that we know that's that this quadratic equation is monic, then these are the rest of the steps that you need to do to factorize it. If it's monic, I'll make another video on how to do it if it's non-monic, and say if you had a 2x squared or 3x squared or anything, and it doesn't have to be positive integers, it could be anything. If this number here is anything other than 1, then it is non-monic. Anyway, enough about that. We know it's monic. Now what's the next step? Well, the next step is to find two numbers that add to give the coefficient of the x and that multiply to give this term over here. Now this term over here is called the constant. And the reason why it's called the constant is because it has no variable attached to it. So we call that term the constant. So like I said, we need to find two numbers that add to give the coefficient of the x, which is 5, and that multiply to give 6. So think now, two numbers that add to give 5 and multiply to give 6. Now, there are two ways you can do this. One is to just guess and check for these small numbers. That's probably the best way to do it, just guess and check. Or the other one is to write down your 5, write down your 6, and list all the factors, and just see which ones match and work, and just do it like that. But from here, I can immediately tell that our numbers are 2 and 3. Now, the reason why it's 2 and 3 is because if you have 2 and 3, if you add them, you get 5. And if you go 2 multiplied by 3, you get 6. So there are two numbers. And some people always get confused. They always forget. They go, which ones do I add and which ones do I multiply? Do I add the 6 and do the two numbers in a multiply to give the 5, or is it the other way around? Now, the easiest way to remember this is to just remember that A means add and that multiply is M. Then which one comes first in the alphabet? A. So I always remember that it's add first and then multiply second. Anyway, now that we have our two numbers, now what do we actually do with it? Well, what we do is that we split this middle term here, and then so at the moment we have 3 terms in this quadratic equation. And by splitting this term into this, we will then come up with 4 terms, and we factorize the 2 of them. So I probably didn't explain that very well, so let me just show you what I mean. So we can actually rewrite this expression, but instead of doing a 5x, I'm going to split it into a 2x and then a 3x. So as you can see here, I haven't actually changed the expression, because x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 6 equals 0 is actually the same as x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0, which is what we originally had. All I've done is split that middle term. And the reason why I've done that is because that has actually enabled us to factorize it. So since we have 4 terms, I'm going to factorize it in groups of 2. Factorize these 2 terms here, and then these 2 terms, so these 2 terms here, and these 2 terms here. So here, I can take our next as a common factor, and then we'll be left with x plus 2. And here, I can take out a 3 as a common factor, because 3 is common in both 3x and 6. And then we are left with x plus 2. So now this is now we've factorized it, but we haven't factorized it fully, because you can see we actually have an x squared here, and I'm sorry, not an x squared, an x plus 2, and an x plus 2 here. Now that's common in both, so we can actually take that out as a common factor, and then whatever we're left with, we write in another bracket, which is an x plus 3. So we just write that here. And that is that equation fully factorized. Now we can go on to solve. Now the way you do it, if you have a bunch of things multiplied together that equals 0, the way you do this is you then let each part of the expression equal 0. So equals 0 like that, and then you solve. So there are two answers, x equals -3 and x equals -2. So that's all you do, you let each factor equal 0. Now a mistake that some students make is if they have, say, x plus 2, x plus 3, and if they have it equals, say, 3, for example, then here in this example, you actually can't let each factor equal 3 like that. It only works if it's 0. Because think about it, anything multiplied by 0 is 0, so you can do it. But here, you can't, so that is actually wrong. So don't fall into that trap. Whenever you have two factors equaling something, you can just then let each factor equal that. That is wrong. So now I feel like this equation is pretty self-explanatory and a pretty easy one to do. Now the biggest question that students might have now comes all the way back up to here. Why did I choose to write the 2x first and then the 3x second? Well, I chose the 3x second because I knew that 3 could fit into 6. But then, hang on, 2 can also fit into 6 as well. So then why couldn't I swap it around and go x squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6 equals 0? Well, if I did the 3x, then it doesn't fit into, like, I can't take a coefficient out. And yeah, here, well, I can't either. So it's just practice. I mean, it's just fiddling around. So let me try it if I did it the other way. Let's go x squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6. So I don't need to worry about the equals 0 now because we're just factorizing it. So I could take out an x, and then it'll be left with an x plus 3. And then here, I'll be left with a plus 2, and then an x plus 3. So it actually still would work. So you can actually do it multiple ways, like that. But in some situations, it might not actually work. So that's why I just went with that way. So that is it. So there's your answers. X equals -2 and x equals -3. Now you can actually, if you're still not sure, you can actually sub it back into the original equation and see if it works. So if we were to sub that back in, we'd get -2 squared plus 5 multiplied by -2 plus 6. And that equals, -2 squared is 4. Plus 5 times -2, that's -10. So 4 minus 10 is, oh, sorry. So 4 minus 10 is -6, add 6, and that equals 0, so check. And then here, we can do the same thing with the -3. So -3 squared plus 5 times -3 plus 6, and what does this equal? -3 squared, 9, plus 5 times -3, so 9 minus 15, that will give you -6, you add 6, and that also equals 0, so check. And you should always be getting two answers as well, because it's a quadratic. That means it has two answers. If it was a cubic, that means it would have 3. If it was a quartic, it means it would have 4. It's just the highest power of x. That's how many solutions the equation has, unless it's like a perfect square or something where they have multiple solutions that are the same. So anyway, that is how you solve this basic quadratic equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments. And yeah, if you'd like to see more examples on this. But anyway, for now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next